Hey everyone, welcome to the Maker Mistaker podcast. We talk about personal development here, but in reality, I just like having deep conversations about life. My mission is to help us all live in integrity with our truth, overcoming fears, bad habits, and limiting beliefs so we can create the life we want. This is episode 7, and today we've got an interesting topic. One that I'm not really sure where it's going to go, but I'm excited to find out. And today's topic is the ego, or mind, or what's the difference. So I'm your host, Jeff Finley, and with me is my co-host, George Coghill. Say hello.
Hello.
How's it going, George? It's been a month and a half since we last got together for a podcast. How have you been?
It's been good overall. Been working hard to get. I got a Kickstarter campaign that was successfully funded. I'm getting the all the stuff produced for that, so that's been going on, and been trying to enjoy the nicer weather we've been having around here lately a little bit. To get a couple bike rides in actually already. So
yeah, I've been loving the hike, going out into the park, and the weather's been warming up. It's freezing today, but
well, I tell you what, man, I went out all winter too, man. As long as it wasn't like super blizzard out there, I got some Under Armour thermals, and I went out and hiked there as much as I possibly could in the winter, because I mean it's just like you get into it's like going back to our earlier episodes about habits and all that kind of stuff. What I didn't want to have happen over the winter was getting out of exercising and getting out of that, getting out to the park and hiking, because it's so easy over the winter to get into the habit of not doing that stuff, and then when the spring comes around you're like so
yeah, totally.
But it is nicer to do it in the nice weather, man. It's like seeing the sun and being able to do it at 7 p.m. is much nicer than 4:30.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm actually going to be sleeping in a treehouse next week, or this weekend.
What?
Yeah, I'm going to be going down to Mohican and sleeping on Monday and Tuesday night in a pretty big treehouse. I'm excited about it. It's going to be kind of like a digital detox, like a meditation retreat for me.
Oh, I see. So it's like you're renting it or whatever.
Yeah, I'm renting it. It's not a tree house like you would expect from when you're a kid. If you've seen the show like Treehouse Builders or whatever it's called, Treehouse Masters, it's like that. It's like a cabin up in a tree.
I saw something about there's like a show or something where people like you said, they rent it out for, it's like in their backyard, but then you just use it to like hang out for a weekend and just get out of civilized life or whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. So I'm gonna bring a couple books with me, and
How much does that cost?
I think it cost me a total of $450 for 2 nights.
And I got to build myself a treehouse now.
I know.
I'm renting that thing out.
Yeah. I've been looking forward to it. It was something that was on my bucket list. It's like sleep in a treehouse, and I decided to take action on that goal today and just go for it. So not today, but this year, like I decided to do it, and so I booked it months ago, and it's finally coming up. And I thought that I was going to have my book done by the time I would go sleep in the treehouse, but that's not the case. I actually haven't released my book yet. So for you guys listening, my book is called Wake Up, The Morning Routine That Will Change Your Life, about my awakening and how I started waking up early, and all about habits and, the stuff that you do to get yourself to wake up early and how to keep the habit. So I've been working on that since January, since I became full-time freelance. And that's the other update that I have is I just sent it to print last weekend. So I'm waiting for my proof copy from Amazon to give me like a copy of what it's going to look like so I can approve that. Then I got to create my landing page on my website and get all the products ready to go and launch and live and get a release date and all that stuff. So the writing's done, the book's done. I just got to start gathering the stuff for the launch. I'm very excited about that actually, because I mean, that's my project that I've been working on for 6 months. So, and I don't know, I'm going to be in the treehouse thinking about it. Hoping to just take some detox away from social media, some detox away from the internet, and consuming content all the time, and go out in nature for a while. I think it'll be fun for me.
It'll be interesting to hear your report, man.
Yeah. So today's topic is the ego, the ego / mind. So what's the difference? I mean, the ego, from what I know, George, the the ego, when I learned about it, I initially learned about it in like psychology class, the id, the ego, the superego, but that's not the definition that I give it now. What I consider it now is this sort of false self, this sense of self that you have, this identity that you give yourself that kind of grows and builds over time as you're from the day you're born. You develop this personality, this sense of who what you know you are, and it's kind of it's you in relation to other people. It's how you see yourself. What do you think it is, George?
Well, what was the definition that you had before that you think was inaccurate?
It was like, oh, that guy's got a hell of an ego. He's kind of an
Oh, yeah.
asshole. He's an arrogant prick.
Well, I mean, you run in. That's the thing with a lot of this stuff too. Is like I've been working on this essay about nutrition just for my own benefit to some degree, but also for my blog. And you run into a lot of things like like the word essential fatty acids, if you ever heard of that word, or
Yeah,
essential nutrients. The word essential in nutrition actually means that the body can't, like, even the non-essential ones are required to live, but the word essential is used for indicating, it's a scientific way of saying that the body can't produce it with other, you can't synthesize it with other stuff that you eat. So some of them your body can make on its own, some of them it has to get from the diet, and the ones that it has to get from the diet are called essential. So it can be misleading when you hear that word and thinking, oh, I don't need the rest of them. It's like, no, you need them all. You just, that word essential isn't the way people use it in common. And I think like the ego is the same thing, where it's taken this it's gone on down this thing where people think it's like, this inflated sense of self. And I guess, I don't know enough of, like, I could be wrong here, but I think that's like that all came from Sigmund Freud, but I'm not 100% sure.
yeah, yeah. The whole id, ego, and superego. That was from the Freud era, and that's what we learned in psychology class. But that definition, I don't even know the definition of that. And I forget. I don't even remember it. But that's the first time I ever heard the word ego in like an educational context, other than that guy's got a huge ego, meaning that he's full of himself or something. He thinks so highly of himself that other people are less than him. You know, you have a sense
Right.
of arrogance or pride, and I think that that accurately describes what ego is, but only like a distorted direction of the ego. Like one way you could take it, you can say another person has a very positive or a very well, yeah. Generally, ego was referred when people had an ego that was out of control, so to speak. You didn't really hear about it in relation to something that was good.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking on the Wikipedia page, and I guess it really, yeah, I mean, it's too much to read here while we're talking, but yeah, I mean, when I use that word, or for me, like the definition that you gave was really the way I approach it too, is like, and of course, like I said before we started hit record here, is that a lot of my thinking is influenced by Alan Watts lectures and books
Mhm.
and stuff, because he gets into, I mean, his perspective comes from like Hindu philosophy and the non-dual aspect of reality, or theory of reality. And so when I mean, Alan Watts, even since one of his recent lectures, he just says, the ego is just, it's not, it's like that's one of the things with meditation, or quote unquote enlightenment, or whatever, all these things, is they say that people, or some people think you're supposed to get rid of the ego or whatever, but Alan Watts likes to bring this up, where his idea that it's an illusion, like it's like this idea that we're attached to, like, the definition that I would give is that it's a sense of self. So it's like the identity that you have when you say me or I, or those kind of words, that's, you're referring to your ego. But uh, Alan Watts and some other guys really brought to my attention how you get the ego could be considered. I like to use the analogy of, like, it's almost like you have this, like, modeling clay or something, that your interactions with people and society and civilization and culture and everything, from the day you're, I mean, literally from the day you're born, you know, from from then on is your ego is like the result of whatever it is that makes up you getting smushed into this mold. You know what I mean? So it's like you identify with what has pushed on you, like you said earlier, like the society influencing you, but we become attached to that story, you know. So it's like the ego is
Yeah.
not like this. Like a lot of people want to assume that, like, you know, another Alan Watts line is where, you know, people think, you know, we're this body that when you're born, like, you know, like there's some cosmic hypodermic needle that, you know, squirts you into a body, and then you're that's your ego or yourself. Your identity is placed into this physical, like he calls it the bag of skin, which I think is awesome. But
Hmm.
you know, it's like the idea is more along the lines of like it's the result of the interactions you have in your experience of the world. So it's this very arbitrary thing. It's not even, and it's like he says, it's like an illusion. It's like this thing that is, you know, I mean, the way I kind of look at everything is like, you know, I refer like I don't, you know, touching a little bit back on meditation. I don't know if we talked about the practice they call noting. So it's, you know, Noting, like if you were to note something.
Right. Yeah. I don't think we talked about that.
I don't think we did either, but that's a that's not an advanced thing. It's just a different thing that some people suggest doing in some different systems. But I play with that sometimes, even just during the day. And I one of the, you know, one of the I have like these 4 or 5 core things that my thoughts always seem to categorize into. And the way you do noting is just when a thought arises, you go, you just you use one word to define it, and then that way you can just you've noted it, you've paid attention to it, you just let it go. So you're not like thinking about it, and
Hmm.
you find pretty quickly that your thoughts stumble into like these 5 categories, man, and like, you know, it's regret, anticipation, and whatever. So there's like very very basic things, you know, that planning and replaying, you know, the past and stuff like that. But one of the things that I've noticed for myself a lot, I refer to it as the paranoid radar, and you have you know, you have that part of your mind that's, you know, one of the thought processes that are going on in your mind is, you know, trying to, it's, you know, the way that they say that, you know, your mind, one of the goals of your mind is to it's a system designed to look for threats and to avoid them. You know, it's a survival mechanism that your brain uses.
Yeah.
So the sense of self is also a survival mechanism tool. You know, so you have this, and that's why I call it the paranoid radar, because it's designed to be paranoid. It's looking for danger out there in the world. So a lot of times it can overreact, especially these days, because there isn't anything for it to do, that it goes a little bit haywire, looking for anything to be paranoid about, and looking for danger in anything. But but I think sometimes like that paranoid radar, that you know, that's the thing that we attach to as the ego. We start identifying with this, you know, because it's the most dominant thing sometimes that's going on, is like, you know, what's going
Hmm.
on over there, and what is this, and did I do the right thing there, and you know, making sure you do, you know, you make your plans properly for the future and stuff like that. That's all part of like this radar system that's going on in your head. And it goes on so much that we can, you know, we start to identify with this thing and think like, well, that's just who I am. And it really isn't. It's just like, you know, it's like identifying with the speedometer in your car. It's like, no, that thing's just there all the time. It's just because you're looking at it doesn't mean that has anything to do with how the car drives, you know? I don't know if any of that made any sense. I was kind of rambling there for a bit.
Yeah, no, I think you touched on a couple good things um that kind of align with with what I think about the ego. That the ego's ultimate purpose is to keep us alive, to help us survive on Earth. Um, and as our spirit or soul or true self, the awareness that's behind the ego, our true self as it incarnates into the body, that then we adopt this earthly personality. And we even have egos beyond our earthly personality, our cosmic ego, as George Kavassalis likes to say, that like we live in duality kind of all the way up until we are sort of united with our soul, if you want to go to that far with it. But like this concept of other, there's the concept of other as separation, and then there's oneness, like we are all one. And that's sort of the difference, this unity consciousness, or this universal oneness, that we're all from the same soup, so to speak. And then there's the ego, which is this separation, like it defines me versus you, this separation of comparison, essentially, and it keeps us alive. That's the point of it. So it's what, when we look at the world, we look for dangers, like you call the paranoid radar. It's constantly on the radar, or on the lookout for things that could cause us pain. And then, of course, things that do cause us pain, we now have a track record, and it kind of grows and learns from its experience. But the problem that people have is when they identify with the ego as their true self, as their identity. So say, for example, on a practical thing, like I'm a graphic designer, and I assign a label to myself. And then I'm a certain type of graphic designer. I've got a certain style. And then also I have a certain way of speaking or meeting. When I talk to people, I have a certain, attitude that I have. Like I'm a nice guy. Or like, say when someone just asks you a question, who are you? And you start rattling off things like your Twitter bio, or the things that you've done or the things you've accomplished. All those things are sort of attachments. Attachments that you identify with that kind of make up your personality, your earthly personality, your identity, your ego, your sense of self, ultimately. And when you start to identify with that, you want to protect it. You want to protect that reputation. You want to protect your status. Say, for example, like what Sean Webb of the I Am Spirituality podcast talks about, is we have this attachment map that is kind of all centered. It's like, imagine your sense of self in the center, and then on a circle, like a graph all around it, and that's your attachment map. Depending on how attached you are to a particular thing, identity, concept, religious affiliation, or sports team, all those things, you kind of assemble into this sense of self. It's all this weird, vague soup that you have, and this is your sense of self. And then when any of those gets attacked, or it gets, say if somebody attacks the political party that you belong to, as you identify with, you're going to get angry, as if it's yourself that has just been attacked. But what Sean was able to help me realize was, and a lot of the Buddhist traditions and a lot of Indian Hindu traditions and everything like that, they talk a lot about this, is that's not who you really are. There's a underlying self beneath that. And then that what you think is who you are is all an illusion, all a creation that you and society created for you. And that's what causes a lot of your emotional suffering and all of that stuff. So the reason why ego is an important topic is because it creates a lot of the suffering in the world. It's sort of this prime reason why we suffer, is because of our egos, because of who we think we are, and all of our attachments.
Well, and yeah, I mean, that's, the going back to the Alan Watts thing, is he even gets into the idea that, like you had mentioned, like it being a false self. Well, he's like, it's not even a thing. It's like a completely, it's not even, it doesn't even exist. It's not, it's like it's a conglomeration, like you said before, of attachments. The conglomeration of like, well, I like this and I don't like that, and it's like, these aren't even, these are things that there's nothing tangible or I hate to use the word physical, because it's not, but there's not there's nothing there. There's nothing there to like, it's not even like it's an illusion. I guess it could be an illusion, but it's like one of his analogies, I think that he used this one was, if you had a cigarette that's lit in the dark and you spin it really fast, it looks like a circle, you know what I mean? Because there's a persistence of vision or whatever, but that's just an illusion that it's a circle. It's just one dot that's being spun around. And he's like, that's the same with the ego. It's this thing that's in motion, and it's kind of constantly, affecting your mind and your thoughts, but there's nothing there. And that's actually the thing that we attach to, is the part of it that isn't even, it's a very tricky thing to explain. I know I'm not doing very well, but it's it's beyond what I'm trying to get at is like, it's not like there's like, it's like this fake version of you. It's like, no, you've attached to like, like like he uses the word like a mirage. It's like it's a
Right.
mirage that it's totally looks real and it appears to be, and it's just, it has all the to the senses it seems like it is, but it's really there's nothing there at all. There's nothing to attach to or to get rid. That's one of the things he talks about is like there's nothing to get rid of because the ego doesn't exist. It's not. It's a concept. It's a word. That's really all it is. It's an idea that we've labeled an experience and then taken it to mean, oh, it's a thing or it actually does exist. And he's like, no, it's not. It's not that at all. So
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point because I want to bring up mind, where mind fits in, and mind and thinking, because right now we live in a culture, a secular culture that's kind of anti-spiritual in a lot of ways. I mean, there's religion and all that stuff, but there's a secular culture that's really all about the physical body and the physical world that we live in, and it's all about the intellect, like knowledge and intellect, and mind knowledge, essentially mind enlightenment, and like what where that gets into the where it gets tricky, I guess, where it fits in with ego is that it's almost like your thoughts and your thinking, you feel like the more you know, the more you think, the more you can think yourself out of problems and all this stuff, but it's all an illusion, it's all a creation, that it's like this temporary identity for yourself while you're here on earth. And it's man, this is a tough topic to talk about, especially for me myself, who's not like an expert on this stuff. It's stuff that I'm just figuring out as I go along. And if it wasn't for Sean Webb kind of identifying the whole true self, false self thing, pointing out what ego is, I never would have even have resonated with this whole spiritual path. But when he pointed it out, something about me really resonated with it, that this isn't really who you are. So let's get into that. Who are we really, George? If we have this sense of self, if we think like, well, I am an artist, or I am my name, I am, but that's not who I really am, then what is it?
well,
Yeah, what is it?
here's an interesting thing that's like I finished. I read this book over the past week was called the Nerdist Way. Is that what it was? But it was Chris Hardwick. I guess he's like a TV dude or something. I don't know, but
Hmm.
it sounded really interesting, and it was the guy was like right up our alley as far as like trying to get his shit together and personal development stuff, whatever. And he's a comedian or something too. So the book was pretty funny at times. I mean, if you're a nerd,
Yeah.
which I am, so I mean, I totally was talking about. But at any rate, he brings up this topic at one point in time where and this is something that you pick up definitely from meditation too, but and you can find it on your own. But he's like, he very very simply put it, you don't have to listen to what goes on in your head. The thoughts that go on in your head. You don't have to listen to them or agree with them. Or especially identify with them. And
Yeah.
to me, that's what the idea of mind is, and that's one of the things where that was one of the, I guess, the first aha moments that I had from a lot of looking into, or not looking into, but actually putting into practice a lot of this stuff is like, I was like, yeah, you don't have to really, I can just ignore what's going on up there. I don't, that's
Yeah.
just, it's happening, doesn't it? And then you realize like, oh yeah, the mind is like, because, that's what they refer to the mind as, like a tool, it's like, it does have positive things and you have to use it. I mean, you have no choice, but you eventually realize that you can't stop it. So you don't like, it's like complaining about like the sun coming up every day. It's like, that's tough luck. You figure out how to work around that. So same with your mind is like, it doesn't just because it's there. I was thinking about this today on a hike. I was like, it is kind of bogus though. You're stuck with it, like you can't really like get a new one, I
And
guess
you
you
can't
can.
like turn it off like a light switch, like you wish you could. Like, I should have control over my mind, so I should be able to turn it off when I want.
But I think a lot of people, that's and I know I was one of them too, is that you think, well, no, you're all the things that go on in your head, all the thoughts that go on, that's who you are. And you thought those things. And to me, that's where the ego comes into play, where it's like you start identifying with the thoughts, and then you're like, well, I'm a person. Who I am is someone who thinks these things, and then that you would attach or you include all the things that you agree with and disagree with and prefer and despise and et cetera, et cetera. So like
Yeah.
that's to me that's where the mind comes into play. Where the mind is like this. It's like this. I mean, I refer to it as like the annoying hitchhiker. It's like I think we talked about this before when I was leaving the grocery store one day, and your mind is very critical a lot of times, judgmental and stuff, and I had the thought of just like something critical about somebody's appearance that was walking by me, and I realized it's like I picked up some jerk, some hitchhiker, and he was just some jerk, and but I never decided like, hey, this is my car. You can just get out. You know what I mean? So it's like I think we all live this way where your mind it's a hitchhiker you can't get rid of, but you don't have to listen to what he says. And what a lot of people end up doing, and that's where I think this ego thing comes in, is like an ego in the sense of identity is it's you absorb this stream of like the mind is almost the ego's way of perpetuating itself. You know what I mean? So it's like the ego knows its
Yes.
sense of self needs to preserve its existence, and the only way it can do it is to stay in motion. It's like a bicycle. I'm going to use another bicycle analogy, but you can't ride a bike unless it's moving. That's the way you ride a bike. It has to be moving, and I think the ego is the same way, where it always needs to be like establishing its existence, and the way it does that is to keep the mind always active, and that's why at least for meditation and stuff, I sometimes think like, man, when I'm having a really tough meditation, I'm like, I'm getting close to something here because somebody doesn't want me getting in there. You know what I mean? Like I feel like it's like the ego is blocking me from realizing something. So it is a
Mm.
bad meditation sometimes, or difficult ones, or you know
Yeah.
distracted ones sometimes make me think like, hey, I'm getting close to something. So
Yeah. And how the mind is constantly active and all of the thoughts that are happening. Since I would say for the majority of my life, I never even knew that you could identify with thoughts, or that it's almost like I just felt that these were my thoughts and these were my beliefs, and these are my preferences, and like, oh, if I didn't like this, I had to change my preferences. So it's like, oh, I don't affiliate with that religion, or I'm more of a punk rock, I'm into that. I'm into this kind of music, and these are my taste preferences. So it's like, you fill out your profile on MySpace or Facebook, and you like list all the things that you like, and you're not, you're trying to separate yourself from other people. You're being unique, and throughout your culture, you're bought and sold like styles and trends and clothes and all this kind of stuff to kind of be who anybody you want to be. And you look up to celebrities, and you look up to musicians and other artists who seem to embody the type of style or life that you want to live. So you kind of model yourself after certain ways, and you're molding this clay, right? And because it's like the culture we live in is so identified with thought and with the mind and the ego, that it is, and they don't know that you don't have to listen to it. So what happens as a result is, are the thoughts that are in your mind actually coming from you, or are they programmed? Like, are they coming from advertising, society, culture, upbringing? Like, how did they get in there? Like, the music that you heard the day you got up is still playing in your head later on in the day. I mean, like, there are ways of getting in your head, and when you identify with that as who you are, it's such a struggle and such a battle. And that's why, the whole concept of enlightenment and the concept of uh, ascension and all this kind of stuff is really about identifying the difference, the detachment, the sense of that you are not all those thoughts. You don't have to listen to them, and then being able to practice that on a regular basis of identifying when you're having thoughts, and then being able to say, no, I don't want to think that anymore, or this belief no longer serves me. The one that says I'm not good enough, the one that says, that guy's a piece of shit walking out of the grocery store, or I don't like his shoes, he must be this type of person, how does he fit, all of that stuff. Those are thoughts that it's like our minds are so easily manipulated, but our hearts and our intuition, this other sense, this other voice that speaks to us, is not really able to be influenced so much by culture and all of that stuff, because that's more our pure source energy, our more pure being, our soul is more tied to that. That's my understanding of it, at least. But that's why we live in a world that's so manipulated. It's so much advertising, because everyone knows that people identify with certain styles and trends and stuff like that. So they're all trying to get you to decide which part you want to play in a game, where you don't realize you don't even have to play the game. You step out and you can observe the game being played, and you realize it's all an illusion anyway.
well, I mean, you run into this. advertising and stuff, man, where there's a lot of stuff going on there where have we talked about the Century of the Self, that documentary series before?
Yeah, we might have touched on or brought it up at least in one of our early ones, but that is a it's great documentary, The Century of Self. I recommend all of our listeners check that out. Just Google it. It's on YouTube and it's amazing.
Well, but it's like, the whole idea there is like, and that's a whole interesting topic with like, ego and stuff, I guess too. But I think it applies to that. But it's like
Yeah, it sure does.
you like you think like way you look at the way things are today, where everything's very much about what you buy, what you own, what you have. It's like your external signifiers of wealth and possessions and stuff like that. Those are all considered to be that's how you identify, you signify to others. You say, hey, this is, like you said before, this is I'm into this. That's why brands work so well in these days because you can shoot, everybody knows it, like, oh, you're Android or Apple or whatever, or if you're this kind of shoes versus I don't need to be honest, I have no clue what's cool anymore. I never did to be.
No, but the Android and Apple is good. It's like which side do you want to play for?
Well, but it's like it goes so deeper because, like, I mean, I have certain brands that I align with, so I mean, I'm guilty of it too. So, but it's like I just don't know if they're cool or not. I have no idea. I buy what I like, but it's like, but a lot of people use that to like kind of put their identity out there, and it's what's interesting about that Century of the Self is that before the advertising, before advertisers picked up, and it goes again back to Freud, but if it's before they picked up on these principles, it used to be that people were valued for these kind of things we've talked about over these past episodes, the self-development stuff. That was always considered like your quality of character was considered to be that was like people looked up to people who try to make themselves a better person. That was what that you look back in history, and that's where all the quotes come from. From all these guys or Benjamin Franklin and all these dudes like that. So it's like but that was the way everybody thought. It wasn't like just these stuffy white dudes. That was just all society looked up to these kind of people, and they said, oh, these guys are trying to get their shit together. And then the advertisers basically, and that's what the Century of the Self, basically presents the case that the advertisement industry and corporations and everybody involved with it, they basically made us externalize our ego into these, or our sense of identity into these belongings, so that you couldn't do anything internally to make yourself feel better. You felt like you had to go buy something to make yourself like okay, this makes me more complete, and it does work for a little bit because it does give you a little bit of a dopamine hit, and you feel better. But what happens is it wears off very quickly. So they've got you in this. They don't even need to make things. What's that? The term planned obsolescence, where things go bad, so you have to buy a new one. Well, they don't even need to do that because your brain just gets bored with it. It's like a kid getting bored with a toy on before Christmas Day's even over. That's what they've basically turned us into a society of people who. That's what they look for is money, belongings, and then you show people, because that's the whole idea of like, the money shows that you worked hard or whatever, that you're successful. So success is all based off of different things than it used to be in the past. That's like it's kind of sometimes it's frustrating to read about that because I'm like, yeah, man, because it's like I'm not. This stuff to me comes very naturally where I'm like, the self-development stuff. Once I stumbled across it, I'm like, oh yeah, this. I think you and I both talked about this, that once we stumbled across it, you're like, oh, this is the stuff that I never even knew I was interested in it until I found it. And then once you find it, you're like, why don't more people want to do this? And then you find out that it's been engineered so that way, so that they've taken advantage of, again, this externalization of the ego. It's putting the sense of identity in yourself into things you own, or the things that you, like you said, you affiliate with, whether it's a religion or a political group or, unfortunately, an electronics manufacturer. I mean, that's the thing that gets me the most. And I won't deny, I'm an Apple guy. I got a lot of Apple stuff here, but I'm not like crazy about it. But you see people online sometimes they get pissed, but it's because they get pissed because they have identified, like you said earlier, it's like they've externalized their ego onto these things. So if somebody attacks Android, all of a sudden it's attacking them, and it's like, dude, you don't really care about any of that stuff. Deep down inside, you don't care about that. You only care about it because you've chosen to attach to it, even if it was a subconscious choice. And again, that goes back to advertising. So, you know, that's a big rabbit hole, though, dude.
No, yeah. Like you brought up something that triggered me, like the whole. Okay, it's like there's a couple of things that I want to talk about. The one is creating this dependency on external resources, on other people or other things or other systems. So you can't access your true self or your development within. There's that. That whole thing has been, like you said, it's been engineered to create this dependency, and it has throughout history with all of the different religions and all of the different things. It creates this dependency. So there's that. But then the Century of Self had talked a lot about this perception that there's a few people that are in power that kind of recognize that there's humanity, and it's kind of like a herd of, a herd of sheep or something, or a herd of cattle that is kind of dumb and needs to be governed and needs to be managed and needs to be told what to do. So there's like that concept of there's an elite class that knows what's good for society and will tell society what's good for it, and it will follow. And the advertising industry was a big part of that. And they would advertise, it's sort of the propaganda arm of the elite was the advertising industry. And Edward, was his name Edward Bernays, right?
Yeah, right.
He was the one who coined the term public relations, because propaganda was associated with, Hitler and Germany and Nazism and all that stuff. So they changed it to public relations. And he's even on the record of saying that.
Oh no, these guys freely admit that they did this stuff on purpose too. It's not like it's not like it's just some conspiracy theory. Like they're in the documentary going, "Oh no, yeah, we did this. This is totally what we did. Yeah, we hijacked Floyd's ideas and then made people feel bad about themselves so they would buy stuff." They totally know. They don't like about any of this. Isn't like a theory. This is like you said, the guys that did it totally admit. I mean,
they're proud of it. They think because they are so. Right. They believe that humanity is dumb and doesn't know any better. To them, it's like they're like, this is a level of human advancement. We figured it out. We figured out how to keep humanity at a certain like level of discontent, to continue to buy products, to continue to sustain the economy, to continue to sustain the power hierarchy. And
that was one of my after watching that documentary, I had the phrase popped in my head where I'm like, positive self-esteem is bad for the economy, man. And I don't think it really is. I think it would be dangerous if people all had healthy egos, man.
It is. And that's the whole point. It's like, you don't really create a product. You create a product to fulfill a need, but like you have to create the need or engineer a need, so you make women feel really bad about themselves, and then you make them feel like the way they can feel better is by buying all these beauty products and becoming obsessed with fashion and appearance, rather than, other feminines or other qualities of the divine feminine, like nurturing and love and emotion and, all of that kind of stuff.
Well, it's we all get hooked or hijacked by this stuff. And I remember when I'm trying to think of how long ago it was now. It was last summer, I guess, last fall. But my phone contract was up, and I was like, I just like by default upgraded my phone and whatever. And then I got it in hand, and I was like, it was interesting because I wasn't even all that excited about doing it. And then when I actually had it, I'm like, you know what? I don't want this thing. I realized that something had changed in my brain between having ordered it and gotten it and having it in my hand. And it was weird because I like in the past I had been like, oh yeah, I want to get the latest and the greatest and whatever. And I never really associated with like, any kind of void within, but I just knew when I had it in my hand, I actually felt worse having the things. I had spent money and I was, things were a little bit financially tight at the time anyway. So I was like, wait a minute, I just paid money for this thing that I also have to pay, more per month for owning it, because you don't get, those phones aren't $200. Those phones are you pay for those things for your monthly payments. And and I took it back. There was people still waiting in line for the iPhone 6 when I took that thing back. And the guy at the store was like, "What? What are you doing? You really gonna return this thing?" I'm like, I don't want it." And he was really surprised. People in the store they're like, "Well, you can just get." I'm like, "No, I don't. I'm like, to be honest, I don't want to be involved in the whole having to upgrade everything. I don't. I wanted to break myself of that pattern, and it was like I had definitely made a shift from the person I was before, who I didn't even think. Let's put it this way: I didn't even think. I never even used my brain to make a decision. I just assumed. I just went along with the programming and bought the new thing when it came along, and
Yeah.
it was a good. I don't know. It was an interesting thing to experience firsthand, because like I said, we're all guilty of doing these kind of things, and it's like we do have this externalized ego, which is an interesting concept, but it's like you have these attachments to these products that have nothing to do with you, and you can get really uh, you can have hangups about this stuff, man. And it's like I mean, and that, again, I'm going back to this idea of the ego and being a fictional thing. It's like all this is, it's a collection of preferences that we've identified with, and owning something new is the way of saying, oh, look, I can, who knows? I couldn't even tell you what my subconscious reason for doing it. I mean, part of it's just, I'm a gadget person, but, I didn't even really want the thing, and I still bought it, which was really weird. And it was like, that's when I really, it's almost like this addiction to some degree.
Oh yeah, it's all engineered, and that's. I mean, I don't see anything really wrong with it because, well, I do think it's wrong to some extent, like for myself. When you recognize it and then now you're buying it and you're feeling bad about it, you've definitely transcended something. Your consciousness has evolved and you're waking up and you're seeing it, and so it's like now you can actually make a choice. You can step away from it and you sort of say no and choose your own thoughts, choose your own habits. You've been choosing your own habits and for years now. So you're kind of getting into the situation where you're taking back your power to choose and to wake up to the fact that you are sort of playing in some sort of game.
Well, it's the interesting thing. I had was it yesterday or today, but I had this thought that, like, no, it was last night. I was thinking, I don't know why I was thinking about smoking again, but I think it was about the addiction and making choices like that. But I realized that the way I quit smoking was when I realized that I couldn't quit. If that makes any sense. Like, that's what got me to quit, was realizing that I was so addicted to it that I couldn't quit. So I was so, when I made that realization, I was like, oh no, now I have to, because I can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like a lightning bolt of inspiration.
Right, but it was like I had to be that hooked on something for me to realize that I needed to stop it. And it was almost the same thing with, like, the phone thing, where I was like, that it was the realization that I just bought something that I didn't even really want, and but I had to actually buy it and take it back in order for it to sink in. You know what I mean? I had to get almost the bottom of the barrel kind of an idea, but
yeah. So like the ego sounds like it's kind of a bad thing, but like it's the only reason it's a bad thing now is because of how it's sort of been hijacked and manipulated. It's in the earthly realm. It's very easy to that's how you manipulate. That's how you control. Through ego, and but ego at its source is a good. It's a good thing. It's here. It's not like we chose to. Yeah. What am I trying to say here? It's like we have ego for a reason. It exists to keep us protected and to survive, and it creates this sense of separation, the duality nature, so we can survive here on Earth. Now, if you want, like, my perspective, I know this might differ from you, George, but where I believe that we are our soul and we incarnate to Earth into a human sort of DNA skin suit, and we to have an earthly experience to evolve consciousness, to evolve. To evolve consciousness, to learn through contrast, through duality, through love and hate, and fear and love, and the different extremes, and so for example, to know freedom, you must know slavery. In order to create the desire to expand and to want freedom, you have to be suppressed in some way, and so that's sort of the whole purpose of incarnating into Earth. Now, that's my perspective. And so, like, ego is the sort of identity that you attach, your earthly personality that kind of puts you in and keeps you individual in your skin suit and in the process of identifying yourself from all the other different skin suits on the planet. And it helps you survive. But the fact that it's so easy manipulated through mind, through thought, that's where it gets, and through emotion. And it's so manipulated and easy to kind of, by the people who know what they're doing, like the elite class, like the people who run the advertising industry, they know how to manipulate the ego. But then when the person who's being manipulated wakes up to that manipulation, they now know how to manipulate the ego, and they can say, "Look, I know what you're doing to me. I'm going to say no." So that's sort of this whole process of waking up, and the whole process of sovereignty. To me, the word sovereignty is being able to choose your thoughts and to know what you're thinking and to know where you're getting those thoughts from, and especially the ones that make you feel really bad and keep you depressed. Knowing where those come from and how to replace them with good thoughts and all of that. But yeah, that's my perception, and I know it might differ from what you think, George, but I just had to put that out there.
Well, I mean, yeah, you know me, man. I come from direct experience, so it's like we know the ego exists because we deal with it on a regular basis. All the other stuff you mentioned, I don't know. I mean, maybe I could. There's no, for me, like it comes down to empirical evidence, and we experience at least the effects of the ego, even if it's an illusion. We still, at least we experience our reactions to this process or this experience of ego that we've been talking about. As far as where it comes from or why it's, or what's behind it all, I don't have any answers.
That's a very big question. Yeah. Like, where does ego come from? Why is it even here? What's the purpose of it? That's a sure big question.
I mean, but I mean, and that's some of the things that attract me to things like meditation and such, is that they say, hey, if you stick with these practices, you'll have direct experiences of these states, and you can know for yourself. That's where I come from. I'm not really a believer person anymore. I mean, I guess I kind of am. I guess we all are to some degree, but
yeah, sure.
I did my fair share of believing in the past, so I got disappointed greatly. So I'm like more of a direct experience person. So as far as like what you had mentioned, I don't really have much of a comment there because I don't have any experience from it.
Right. Yeah. But it's one of those things where you have you have to have a belief sort of in order to like since you can choose your beliefs, and your beliefs kind of paint you a picture of your reality. And, that's where you can decide what you want to believe about your reality. You can decide that you can believe in magic, for example, and kind of create that world for yourself.
But you could say that, you can say, I don't believe that that the sun's going to rise tomorrow, but it's going to. Like, you don't have any control over that. Like, I guess my problem with like the word belief is that it may be the definition that we may have different definitions. Like we talked at the beginning about, macronutrient, or what did I mention? Essential fatty acids and stuff.
Yeah.
Same with the ego. Like the word belief is a little bit of a loaded thing because as far as, you may be using it in a different context. My context of belief says like, when someone says I believe something, it's like they know this to be true. That's what the word belief means to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, there's only the only thing that I know to be true is the things that I've experienced directly. So I can't just, to me, it's like you can't just choose to believe something, like, because you don't know if it's true or not unless you've had the experience. So you can say that concept is really appealing to me, and I'm going to work within that paradigm, or I'm going to subscribe to that reality tunnel for the time being. But as far as I always go back to a quote from Robert Anton Wilson, which is one of my favorite authors, but I think he was quoting a quantum physicist who said that as far as he was concerned, belief was the death of intelligence. It was like that was once you decided to believe, then you stop questioning things. So
yeah,
I guess that's one of my problems with that word, is that it's is a very religious connotation to me, where it's like, people are like, well, I believe in God. Well, that's just that's an arbitrary choice as far as I'm concerned. If they just say, "Oh, I just believe it," it's like I have a hard time with that word. So maybe you can clear that. Maybe you have a different perspective on that than I do.
No, well, George, I definitely like your direct experience thing, and like that the problem is when people hear something and then they believe it and then they reiterate it as truth without having any knowing or experience, like you said. But we operate in a world of belief systems, and like what you're saying comes from your own belief systems of wanting to experience it and have direct empirical evidence. Like it's even though it's a different belief system, and like that's where I think it's belief is sort of like the thoughts or the attachments to the thoughts that you have that you subscribe to that kind of help you understand reality and 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 that you can actually choose your beliefs, meaning like I can listen to someone and choose not to believe them or choose to believe them or choose to take it into my worldview, and then knowing that your worldview is constantly changing, your understanding of the world. But even though it's your understanding of the world, it's still coming from your mind, your thoughts, which are limiting in and of itself, limited by language, like the English language. I mean, there's only so many words to describe an infinite number of experiences and feelings and possibilities. And language in and of itself makes it really difficult because language was created by humans, and it kind of by only knowing so many words, there's so much vocabulary. If you stay in the mental realm, you really have a hard time getting very far unless you.
But that goes back to what I'm saying about direct experience. You don't need to believe anything if you experience it firsthand. So that's where
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. Like for sure.
These are in the mental realm. They're in the hypothetical. I like that how that sounds. I've thought that through, and I'm like, nope. I want the one where it's like, I've had the experience. I'm like, because like I went through this with, when I was first getting interested in lucid dreaming years ago.
Yeah.
I was skeptical about it because I was like, I don't know. I never had one, and people say it's true. Then there were scientists who said it was a bunch of bunk, and I was like, I don't know who do you believe? There were scientists on both sides that said that, and also non-scientists who said, no, they're totally true. And I was interested in it, and we've talked about this before, but I went through the experience or put the practices into practice, whatever. I put those the techniques into practice, and I had the direct experience myself. So it's like I don't need to believe that lucid dreaming is real. I know that it is. It's had it happen. It's not. It's totally, absolutely real as far as I'm concerned. Now, before I had that experience, if I would have agreed with anybody, and then to me that would have been an unfounded belief. I would have been like, well, I believe it, but why would I believe it? I don't know that it's true.
Mm-hmm.
It would just be something that sounded I wanted to be true, for example. So it's something I liked, or the opposite, or something I rejected, I didn't like. But for me, it was like I actually had it happen. So I'm like, I know that it's real. So it's not like that's where I come from. Is like it's not about intellectualizing something. It's about having something where you're going back to the self that we're talking, the ego that we're talking about, where the experience that I have as this individual person, I can confirm the validity of the experience. Like if I can't do that, that's right. To me, it gets into speculation, and I'm open to speculation. I just won't say like, oh, that is how things are. My approach would be, that's interesting. Show me how to have that experience for myself. So I'm like,
yeah,
I won't pull something in and go, that is part of the world that I live in. I'll say, that is potentially part of the world that I live in. Show me how to have that experience, and if I can, and I do, then I maybe I'll incorporate that. But can't just go, oh, that sounds awesome. I'm gonna take that. That's gonna put that in the backpack. That I can't do that because I'm like, that's not. There's too many things in I mean, you get on the internet, man. There are some crazy. Like I was just reading on some books. I sent you those podcast links that I thought were interesting with those yoga lectures, and I ended up reading one of the books by these dudes. The guy that the lecture people were, the organization that they were associated with. And it was so crazy talk, insane, that I couldn't believe. Like, I was like almost embarrassed that I sent those links to you, because the guy that wrote the book that they got it from was just talking nonsense, and I was like, how did these people who seem very intelligent and definitely well read and everything about the topics they're interested in, like, how do you read, like, the book that they said was the core book of their thing was so, I mean, it was just making wild, like, the nice thing for me as a skeptic was he made a lot of wild predictions that back in the 50s that just did not come true whatsoever. And he would, oh, no, well, in 2 years we'll know this. And totally none of that stuff ever happened. But he was just making all kinds of wacky, crazy claims. But obviously some of these people that put out these lecture podcasts totally believe it, or they at least they believe to some degree. I mean, I couldn't get through the first chapter without I couldn't do it, because it was just so much just nonsense. But somebody read that and believed it. So, going back to this question, where would you stand on that? Like, if, like, you can't, like, because then you're just using your mind to pick and choose what you prefer, as opposed to, if you're not using it from a direct experience, then it's just you're saying that sounds good to me, that doesn't sound good to me. I mean, somebody thought that being a Nazi was a good idea at one point in time. They really believed that. The Nazis believed that they were doing the right thing for themselves. So
Right.
you can't, that's why I have a problem with belief, because belief can be, beliefs, just like the advertisers, you get manipulated into believing things that aren't necessarily true, or don't have any validity whatsoever. So,
No, you're right, George. I mean, I agree with you a lot more than I let on. I think, I mean, I subscribe more towards don't attach yourself to any belief system. Like, don't attach yourself. You can resonate with it and put it into your worldview for the time being, but, like, it's almost like if you stop questioning, or if you stop seeking your own experience or your own truth, that's when things get weird. And that's how it's easy to get manipulated, because where does those beliefs come from, and who does that belief actually serve? I mean, like, who's the one that created that belief, and where did it come from, and what was the purpose of it, and how did you discover it, and all that stuff. So I think the topic that we're alluding to here is the topic of discernment. How to know what you read online is true, what is truth actually, and then, but belief, it has the word lie in the word. So it's like, you got to be careful with believing anything that you hear. But what you should do is, if it resonates with you, meaning like something about it feels true to you and you are excited about the idea, you should realize that that's sort of a signal to yourself that you should continue to explore that. Like, something about lucid dreaming appealed to you, George, enough where you wanted to try out the techniques. So it's like something about it felt good to you. So there's a heart resonance, and then you have to use your logic, your ego, your mind to help to analyze it. So you're using the left and the right brain, your feelings and your intellect, to discern something, because there's a lot of, especially when you talk about metaphysical or esoteric stuff that's not provable by empirical science or physical evidence. This is where it's like, what, are you not supposed to talk about this because it can't be proven through, like a physical experience, because even then, how do you even believe, how do you even trust your knowing? That's like, even if you have an experience, because even experience can be manipulated. Like, you go to a concert and they create an experience of like a certain type of emotion, and then you can say, well, that's what I experienced there is this, or something like that, and then you kind of come away with it with an experience. Or you take like LSD or something like that, you have an experience. But even then, it's what you do know is, your experience, and if it's true for you, like if it resonates with you, if it's true for you. And your truth is, and knowing that your truth is always changing. What you're trying to do, what the goal is, for me at least, is to get closer and closer to my authentic truth. What is my purpose on the planet? Why am I here? Am I here to, that's really what I want to know. And so when I find something that maybe is just interesting, like when I talk about spirituality and stuff like that. To me, I wasn't ever really interested in that before, but now I am. And, and like and I'm sort of involved in this truth movement, meaning like, well, why am I so attracted to truth? Like I'm just discovering more about myself and why I'm attracted to it. I'm not, and I might like say, oh, we incarnate here to have a human experience. That's my truth right now. That's how I feel right now. And I want to have a direct experience of that, but I don't really rely on having a direct experience of that in order for me to feel like I have a purpose in the world. Like I don't require it necessarily because I'm not really putting too much weight onto it as sort of like I'm not attached to it so much, I guess. I don't know. I'm still working through things, So it's like, but I do like to have the direct experience and to never really truly believe anyone word for word because they're speaking language and it's their opinion and it's their sort of truth mixed with their society's programming and all of this kind of stuff and culture. There's a whole lot of influences in the words that we read and the ideas that are speaking about. But if anyone wants to kind of look into the topic of discernment and how to discern what's real, what's not, like especially on some of the stuff that's hard to identify.
Yeah, I think we kind of get off topic a little bit, but
well, I think it all comes down to ego because beliefs are attachments that go to your ego, and if somebody attacks your belief, then you feel attacked yourself. So that's why it's sometimes difficult to try to remain detached from your belief because if it's your worldview. Like I can go on Facebook and start posting about my current worldview and then start a fight because so many people will disagree and it assaults their worldview and you're not able to have a coherent conversation about it because it's all about differing worldviews and it's like, well, what one person's truth is not the same as another person's truth, But that's the point of here. I think that's part of the point of being on Earth is its limit. It's the limitation. We're experiencing limitation. It's not. No, there is no direct one answer. I mean, we're all there's a human drive to figure it out, which we can't really deny.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like it does. It definitely, there's no doubt that beliefs and ego are, you know, that's a huge part of the ego is that you do become attached to the beliefs, that you hold. But that's, I guess, that to some degree that almost is what I was getting at is that trying to use a little bit more of a mundane explanation with gadgets and stuff like that. I can only speak to stuff that I can not necessarily put my hands on, but like I can't as far as incarnating on Earth. I don't know if that's true or not. I can't tell you, but I can tell you for a fact that things I do struggle with that I know for a fact, and
Mm-hmm.
the day-to-day stuff. And I think that's where understanding the ego really helps more people out to really if you want to wrap your head around this stuff is to understand where a belief ends and where you begin, as far as like you don't have to like. And that's the thing too, you look in the past of your own past, your own history, and you've changed. All of us have flip-flopped on things that we used to be cheerleaders for this, and now we don't do it at all. Or we used to think that something was totally like you said, you used to not be into spirituality, now you are. So there's who's to say like the things that you believe in don't even you're not even consistent from year to year, 5 years to 5 years, 10 years to 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
let alone being able to say, yeah, this is true, or this belief is who I am. Because like those things, I mean, sometimes that stuff changes from hour to hour. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, you're right.
So it's I don't know. It's a tough. I don't know. It's a tough question. Again, I'm more of a practical person, so it's tough for me to, I'm kind of struggling to chat with you about some of this stuff because I don't, I mean, I just don't go down those speculative paths as much in my head. So
Yeah, no, that's cool. Bring it back to Earth. I know I can be kind of a mystic or a spacey, in some of my ideas, and that's why I like you, George. I mean, because you bring it back to grounded reality, bring it back to Earth. So, I mean, let's bring the conversation back to Earth. So, like when we talk about belief and all that stuff, I guess I want to touch on this one more time. Like, say you have a belief that like I'm I'm going to go to this dance class and I'm a bad dancer. I believe I'm a bad dancer, so I'm going to get made fun of. You can recognize that it's a belief and then you can choose to change it to say, "You know what? I'm good enough the way I am." And you can continue to believe that and you end up creating a life that really kind of reinforces that you are good enough the way you are. Like you can choose your beliefs and then it kind of sculpts a reality based around the thoughts that you choose to think. I guess let's not call them beliefs. Let's just call them thoughts. Like thoughts that you think a lot about yourself are things that kind of help reinforce the life you want to create for yourself. If you think a lot of negative ones, you
that's
can.
like the word paradigm. I would use the word paradigm for that.
Okay. Yeah.
Your worldview, or the whole, everything as a whole, how you perceive things. That's like that to me. That's what a paradigm is. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm sorry.
Oh no, it's cool. I mean, let's bring it back to Earth. So, like, I mean, the ego and the mind are two things that help us survive and kind of help us get through life. But we're kind of in a situation where where we're kind of suppressed or stuck in a way where like we're stuck believing and we're encouraged believing in this sort of competitive nature of the world and ego. And the opposite would be we're all one, we're all united. Everyone has high self-esteem. Everyone feels great about themselves. If the economy collapses because it doesn't, high self-esteem, humans do not create a good capitalist society or whatever. But where else can we go with ego in the mind that we haven't gone yet, or are we pretty much done?
Well, I mean, it's again, I think it's a tough topic, and it's not,
Yeah.
it's not as cut and dried as some of the other things we've talked about. It's a little more abstract, a little more.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know if I don't even know if there is a definition for these things. I mean,
No, we're speaking with only what we know, so it's like, and I don't want to front and say I know everything about this stuff, and I think that's a good thing about this episode in particular because we're kind of covering something that is kind of abstract and there's a lot of different opinions about it, and I think for the first time you and I, George, are kind of hitting a point where we're not just talking about habits, or like procrastination or something that's really easy to kind of understand because it's been written about dozens and dozens of hundreds of times and it's a little bit more practical. But I mean, hey, I like to talk about life and this is part of life and our understanding of it. I mean, ultimately you and I, George, we're figuring out life and we're figuring out why we're here. And you have yours and I have mine, and I think that that's both a beautiful thing.
yeah, I'm definitely. I guess I'm definitely starting with like figuring out my life before I figure out life. You know what I mean? So it's like
Mm-hmm.
that's why I guess I lean towards in the past I've spent a lot of time thinking big thoughts and stuff like that. I guess it is, and I guess I've come in the recent years come back around to being more hands on. Like
Yeah.
what can I actually do as opposed to hypothesizing and speculation and stuff. I mean, I'm not. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying, for me, I went down that path for a lot of years. I think, and I think did like a full circle thing almost to that to come back to, what can I, what can I, what kind of where's my efforts best placed? What can I actually make a change? And I can, a lot of times you read some of these again these self development books, but that's what they say is you got to put your own oxygen mask on before you can help others. So that's kind of like the perspective that where I'm coming from these days is I'm trying to get my own oxygen mask on first. You know what I mean? Before I try to figure out what's going on with everything else.
Yeah, which is something I would recommend that we all do is put our own oxygen mask on first and work on our own development and happiness and fulfillment, because that's the work. You can't really change other people, you change yourself. You enlighten yourself. Well, I think I can sense that the energies are winding up for this episode of the podcast. What do you think, George?
I didn't hear what you said. I'm sorry.
I said I think the energies are indeed winding up for this episode. I think we kind of run out of things to say about the ego and the mind.
It's just a tough topic, man. I mean, it's an interesting one, but I thought we'd be more focused on it when we discuss getting into it. But it's a very tricky, very slippery. You know what I mean? It's not very.
Yeah, because you can't prove it, right? You can't touch it. You said yourself that from Alan Watts that it's like this is illusion, this mirage. So what we're talking about is kind of conceptual. We feel the effects of what we're calling ego. We feel it. So I think people can recognize that there's some truth to what we're saying because they're like, yeah, I feel that. I know what he's talking about. But it's not like you can reach inside and grab your ego and look at it.
Well, it's one of those things, man. You get, you get in the conversations and you realize, it's almost like the opposite of writing something. Sometimes when you write out something, you understand it better, or insights come to you while you're writing, and to some degree, I feel like I understand less now that we've talked about it. You know what I mean?
Wow.
I realize how nebulous this concept is. I'm like, yeah, it's really tough to wrap your head around. I mean, no pun intended. So it's
a mind bender, that's for sure. So let's end it with some practical things that the listeners can do to learn more about ego. And I mean,
go listen to this episode. That's what they should do.
Okay, so go ahead and erase your mind from everything that we talked about. No, but if any of this stuff sounds interesting to you, just do your own research and do your own meditation, silent meditation, and ask these big questions to yourself in meditation, and see what answers pop up for yourself. And
listen to some Alan Watts, man. Alan Watts. I mean, there's a lot of lectures that are legally are not available on YouTube of his, and he's got a lot of interesting insights on these topics. I mean,
he's good.
I enjoy his perspective, and it's, even if you don't agree with him, he's got some interesting. He's got a lot of experience, and he's got an interesting way of presenting this stuff. So it's worth at least checking out.
Yeah, and listen to see where you resonate with, and the things that you are inspired by. Take that. The things that you don't understand or you don't agree with, just disregard those and continue to move on in your quest to seek answers for yourself, and you'll be building your own sort of paradigm of the world and what feels true for you. And it's like this path of discovery, and, continue to blend what you learn with practice of meditation and silence and understanding where your beliefs are coming from and sort of eliminating those beliefs if you don't want them anymore, the ones that no longer serve you or serve the purpose that you're here to do, serve your life, the one you want to create. If they're going against you or they're holding you back, then you can choose to say no to those and adopt new ones and continue on the path of seeking truth and discovery. So I think that's a positive way to end the podcast. And another author that I like is Eckhart Tolle. He's another good one, especially if people are new to the concept of ego and mind and all that, and how our thoughts kind of create our suffering in a lot of ways. And Sean Webb on the I Am Spirituality podcast. We always recommend him, don't we?
Yeah, he's got definitely got some interesting whole external ego stuff that he brings up was really super interesting. So I think that was one of his early. I can't remember what it was one of the early episodes of his podcast, but they're worth listening to. I think it was like 4 or 5, but you can look at I think the descriptions on his podcast will talk about that.
Yep. And so that's all for this episode. So I appreciate all you guys for hanging in there, putting up with our ramblings this week. It's been good, and thanks George for hanging in there and doing this podcast with me. And I think we're gonna take a break from the podcast for a while, and this will be like the end of the season. We're gonna decide where we want to go with the podcast from here on out. But we're gonna take a break, and this is it for a while. But thanks for sticking around and listening. And George, it's always a pleasure.
You too, Jeff.
All right, man. I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye, George.
Sounds good.